Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 7 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll take up is related to Northeast India, as Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the Rising Northeast Summit and also announced that the first Made in India semiconductor chip will be coming from the semiconductor plant in the Northeast. The second article will be related to public interest litigation, as the Supreme Court came down heavily upon the misuse of PILs for publicity. Additionally, we'll take up 5 articles in the simplified, which will be helpful for your prelims and mains preparation. Now, the first article is related to the Northeast India. The context behind it is that Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the Rising Northeast Summit. So, we are focusing upon the economic development of the Northeast region. For example, we announced that the first Made in India semiconductor chip will be manufactured in a semiconductor plant in the Northeast. So, we will discuss the challenges associated with the economic development of the Northeast and the strategies for the economic development of the Northeast India. This is important in both GS2 and GS3 under the topic Indian economy and the issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. When it comes to the Northeast India, we need to prepare 4 major aspects of the Northeast region. The first aspect is the insurgency and the reintegration. Because the region has seen insurgency, for example, in Assam, there was the United Liberation Front of Assam, the National Democratic Front of Bodoland. In Nagaland, there is the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, Isaac Muiva and Khaplang factions. The second aspect that we need to prepare is the environmental conservation aspect, because the Northeast region is rich biodiversity-wise. The third aspect is the strategic aspect, because the region is strategically located. The Northeast India shares boundaries with Bangladesh, Myanmar as well as China. The fourth major aspect is the economic development. Today we'll be focusing upon the economic development aspect of the Northeast region. Now first, let's also have a look at the brief background of the Northeast region. The present day Northeast region's precursor is the Ahom Kingdom. The Ahom Kingdom was established by the Shawns. The Shawns came from Burma and established themselves in the Brahmaputra Valley and established the Ahom Kingdom. But there were Burmese invasions also, and the British intervened when there were Burmese invasions in 1818, and post that the Treaty of Yandabu was signed in 1826. But the British themselves annexed the Ahom Kingdom and made it part of the British territory by 1838, and therefore it came under the British colonial rule. Assam was initially made part of the Bengal province. It was made part of the East Bengal and Assam from 1905 to 1921, but it had to be reverted back because of the protests from the locals there. And then later on, the hill areas, that is Khasi and Jaintia are part of the present day Meghalaya, Naga, Lushai. They were also forcibly merged into the Assam province. And later on, there were migrations into that region, and which led to further tensions with the locals, with the indigenous population there. For example, there was large-scale immigration into the Northeast region from the Bengal province. The reason was workers going for the work in the tea gardens, oil fields, coal fields in the Northeast region. And it led to the demographic shifts. Because of the demographic shifts before the independence of India, it led to the Hindu-Muslim divide also pre-1947. And there was even the clash between the Muslim League and the Congress also. They had the rivalry over the future of Assam before the independence, before the partition of India. Now coming to the economic challenges aspect in particular, let's discuss what are the economic challenges that the Northeast region faces. One of the foremost challenges is the deficit of the infrastructure in the region. For example, when we look at the power sector in the Northeast, it has immense potential. When we look at the hydropower potential, it has 30% of India's hydropower potential to the tune of 38 gigawatt. And when we look at the solar potential also, it has the solar potential of 62 gigawatt. But there are certain challenges. Despite such huge potential, the actual realization, the actual generation of electricity from both hydropower and the solar power is way less, and therefore the per capita availability of the power in the northeast region is less than half of the national average. That is, it is at 570 kilowatt hour, whereas the national average is more than 1200 kilowatt hour. When we look at the hydropower specifically, there are hurdles. For example, there are funding gaps. There are land issues. There are problems of land acquisition for the setting up of the hydropower projects. For example, the setting up of Upper Siang multipurpose project that India wants to set up now, there are also protests. And there are the geological risks, because the setting up of large hydropower projects, the building of large reservoirs or dams, it can cause isostatic imbalance, further leading to earthquakes, the reservoir induced earthquakes. Therefore there are geological risks. When we look at road connectivity, likewise, we rely upon the 22-kilometer wide Siliguri corridor, known as the chicken's neck, and therefore it is the jugular vein of India, which the other countries also comment upon. And there are the intra-regional roads in the region which are poor, and because of the poor shape of the intra-regional roads, it leads to the high transport costs and delays also. Now only India is going to build the first 4-lane expressway in the state of Assam in the northeast region. And there are climate risks also which are an add-on. For example, there are floods, there are frequent landslides also, because the region primarily lies in the Himalayan region. Then another economic challenge is the deficit of the financial resources. The northeast states, they are primarily dependent upon the central funds. They are dependent upon the aids and the transfers which are recommended by the respective finance commissions and the funds that they get from the central government, and the local revenue generation is poor. Likewise, the debt to GDP ratios for most of the states in the northeast region is quite high, and they are way more than the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission. Likewise, when we look at the educational and social indicators, again there is a deficit. As we compare the educational indicators and the human development indicators of the northeast to the national average, it is lagging both in terms of the school infrastructure, which is pretty poor. For example, the lack of availability of toilets, classrooms, etc., and the shortage of teachers, especially in the remote regions, and the high dropout rates of children to assist their parents in the income generating activities. Another economic challenge is the financial inclusion gaps. When we observe, the banking penetration in the northeast region is poor. Likewise, the credit to GDP ratio in the northeastern states is low. It is just 0.3, whereas the national average is to the tune of 0.7. When the credit to GDP ratio improves, that is also an indicator that people are able to access the formal banking credit. That is also an indicator of the increasing financial inclusion. Likewise, the rural cooperatives are also limited in the northeast. Another economic challenge is due to the immigration, the cross-border migration impacts. The cross-border migration, when it is illegal immigration especially, that leads to an economic strain. It leads to the land disputes, it leads to the environmental degradation, because higher the population, higher will be the pressure on the natural resources, which leads to higher degradation of environment, and it leads to the pressure on the urban infrastructure also, for example water, sanitation infrastructure, etc. Likewise, it causes the social security issues also. The social security issues, for example, the ethnic tensions, the demographic changes induced due to the illegal immigration, particularly in the state of Assam from Bangladesh, and the smuggling activities, and the welfare burden which falls upon the state resources, which is already running low. Now, what are the strategies for promoting the economic growth in the region? First, we'll have a look at the broad strategies applicable for the entire region of the northeast. Then we'll have a look at some of the state-wise strategies for suggesting economic development in the northeast. The broad strategies will include the setting up of the green infrastructure development projects. For example, increasing the urban green spaces. The green spaces will ensure that the development is not damaging biodiversity, and the development is climate resilient and sustainable in nature. For example, ensuring the green parks, the urban green roofs, etc. Plus, we can go for the restoration of the wetlands. The restoration of wetlands will promote the ecotourism in the region, and we can rehabilitate the floodplain areas population. Why? Because it will be a cost-effective measure of the flood control. Another strategy can be the push for the renewable energy, which the government is already doing. For example, the potential of the renewable energy in the northeast region is to the tune of more than 1.28 lakh megawatt, which is untapped capacity. This data is picked up from the PIB website of 2022, and the current installed capacity is just 4,800 megawatt. The potential income generation and the employment generation is also there because of the renewable energy projects. There can be a generation of more than 3 million jobs in the solar and wind sectors, especially as per the Center for Energy, Environment and Water. Now, what we can do for pushing the renewable energy, we can set up these small hydro projects, because the large hydropower projects, they can cause the isostatic imbalance, they can cause geological risks, they can cause the resettlement and rehabilitation as well as the land acquisition problems, whereas the small hydro projects, they cause minimal ecological imbalance. We can go for the PPPs and tax incentives as well as the issuing of green bonds for the funding for the financing of the renewable energy projects, and we can establish the microgrids also to ensure the optimum utilization of the power generated through the renewable energy sources. Another strategy can be the promotion of the ecotourism in the northeast region. The ecotourism promotion can also bring about the low impact wildlife tourism also, and attract the tourists not only from India but from the other nations as well. We can go for the state specific campaigns. We need to market the northeast region. We need to have an adventure tourism branding also for the northeast region. Regarding the education and skill development, we can refer to the Himachal Pradesh model. Himachal Pradesh has achieved extraordinary improvements in the education indicators despite having the resource constraints. And how it has achieved so? By ensuring community participation, by giving incentives to the teachers. How we can adapt the Himachal Pradesh model for the northeast for the education and skill development? One, we can ensure that the locals are also participating in the school infrastructure development and maintenance. We can also give the incentives to the teachers if they are posted in the remote areas, and for this we need political commitment also, the cross-party political commitment. Likewise, for the ensuring of financial inclusion in the northeast region, we can promote digital banking, especially in the remote areas, and also the government can run the financial literacy campaigns as well as financial literacy programs by utilizing some role models. Now, let's also have a look at some of the state-wise strategies also which can be implemented, which are feasible and practical, that you can give as suggestions while writing answers. For Assam, we can promote the agro-based industries. For example, the tea industry can be promoted. India is the fourth largest exporter of tea in the world. In Assam, 5% of Assam's gross state domestic product comes from the tea industry itself. But there are certain challenges which need to be addressed first. For example, there is a demand-supply imbalance. The challenge is that the per capita tea consumption has been stagnant. It is less than 1 kg per year, and the labor wages simultaneously are rising due to the inflation and the other costs. And the 95% of the tea estates, the tea gardens, are the small land holdings, and the small land holdings are not able to enjoy the economies of scale, and therefore their expenditures and the costs incurred on the production are higher. Now, what we can suggest? First, we can go for the contract farming. The contract farming can be promoted for the tea production in Assam for ensuring cost efficiency. And we need to promote the branding. The brand Assam tea needs to be promoted worldwide to increase the exports, to increase the demand for this. Likewise, we can promote the horticulture in Assam. In Assam, the horticulture needs to be promoted by setting up better cold storage infrastructure, post-harvest infrastructure by setting up the ice plants, etc. And simultaneously, we need to ensure that the soil fertility is improved as well as maintained in the regions by issuing crop-specific soil health cards. Another aspect for Assam that we can suggest is the promotion of ease of doing business for the MSMEs, because there are quite a few micro, small and medium enterprises operating in Assam, including handloom, sericulture as well as handicrafts. How we can support them? By building export infrastructure, for example setting up trade centers, cold chains, river ports, etc. Likewise, we can set up product specific parks also, for example tea park, bamboo park, food park, pharma park, etc. We can simplify the GST rules for the e-commerce related MSMEs so that they are able to function effectively and are not overburdened due to the regulatory compliance burden. And we can promote the digital initiatives, for example Google Advantage, Google My Business initiative, etc. Likewise, for Nagaland, we can promote the apiculture. The climate of Nagaland is ideally suited for apiculture. For example, it has moderate temperatures and well-distributed rainfall. Also, it has a diverse flora. It has both wild as well as cultivated flora which is diverse and which helps in the abundant availability of the nectar and pollen required for the bees. Therefore, it has the organic honey production potential. So what can we recommend for Nagaland? We can give training to the farmers, the beekeepers, along with the collaboration from the civil society and the NGOs. We can set up the beekeeping cooperatives. Why? Because the modern technology, modern equipment is required for the beekeeping and the collection of honey also. And the modern equipment is expensive. Therefore, the beekeeping cooperatives, they can allow and promote the sharing of the equipment, the modern beekeeping equipment among the farmers. Likewise, for ensuring their financial sustainability, micro loans can be given to the beekeepers, subsidies can be provided, and for ensuring quality control, standardized processing norms can be put in place. At the same time, we need to market the produce also. For example, we can market by the name of brand Nagaland honey. Likewise, for Sikkim, we can promote the organic farming. It is facing certain challenges. It is the first fully organic state of India, but there are challenges related to organic farming that Sikkim has experienced. For example, it has led to the lower yields. It has led to higher costs of production because the organic fertilizers that are used, they are imported, and it leads to the depletion of the forex reserves of India also. But at the same time, despite being organic produce, it does not command a premium pricing upon that produce. So what can we suggest? We can suggest that regarding the production of the organic fertilizers, we can do it locally. We can collaborate with the ICAR for doing the research regarding the production of the organic fertilizers. Likewise, we can go for the branding of the organic products coming from Sikkim so that we are able to command a premium pricing for the organic produce. Now, when it comes to Manipur, the state has experienced ethnic conflict and the problems in social harmony. For example, the Meiteis have been demanded for the ST status in Manipur, but the Kukis oppose the granting of ST status to the Meiteis because they fear that they will be marginalized then. And there is a perceived political bias favoring the Meiteis, and there are the problems related to illegal immigration into Manipur from the border areas from Myanmar also. There is the illegal cross-border drug trade as well as the poppy cultivation in the hilly areas of Manipur also. So what can we suggest to ensure that the ethnic conflict is resolved as soon as possible? We can go for better equitable resource allocation. For example, the redistribution of the seats in the legislature of Manipur, and we can improve the border security by improving cooperation with Myanmar, and we can improve the local governance structures by empowering the hill governance. Likewise, when it comes to Mizoram, we can promote the pisciculture in Mizoram. The current potential is immense in Mizoram because it has the ideal freshwater conditions and there is immense availability of oxygen also in the freshwater. But there are certain constraints when it comes to the pisciculture in Mizoram. For example, we have a shortage of the quality fingerlings and the market linkages, that is the sale after the production of the fish, that is poor, and the farmers do not have adequate training in the modern techniques of the pisciculture. What we can recommend to promote pisciculture in Mizoram? We can promote the establishment of the local fingerling production, establishment of the hatcheries there, and the improvement in the post-harvest infrastructure. For example, the setting up of the cold storages, ice plants, etc. And we can provide the training to the farmers related to aquaculture technology, the disease control among the fishes, and we can come up with a sustainable fisheries policy also for Mizoram. When it comes to Arunachal Pradesh, there are two areas of concern which need to be addressed for the economic development of Arunachal Pradesh. One is the land acquisition and another is forest clearances. Both of them have to be expedited. The delays in the land acquisition and the delays in the forest clearances have to be resolved. We can suggest the setting up of a single approval body for the same. A single body which can approve the land acquisition, the forest clearances as well as the project related clearances. For the border regions, the sensitive districts, we can put in place standard operating protocols also, and we can create exemptions for the strategic projects in Arunachal Pradesh. When it comes to Meghalaya and Tripura, we can recommend the promotion of bamboo. Regarding bamboo, India contributes to 30% of the global bamboo production, and Northeast India contributes to 28% of India's total bamboo stock. Tripura, there 23% of the state's area is under bamboo cultivation. In Meghalaya, it contributes to 6% of India's stock. But there is still untapped potential as India is only commanding just 4% of the share in the global bamboo market. So what can we recommend regarding the bamboo potential realization? One, we can recommend the adoption of large-scale plantations in the outside of the forest areas. And we can go for the value-added processing, for example, flooring, utilizing it in furniture, utilizing in handicrafts, building panels from the bamboo. We can provide the financial support for the bamboo cultivation, for example, again, the loans, subsidies, etc. We can promote it for the infrastructure building, and we can set up the bamboo clusters also for the promotion of bamboo cultivation. And regarding the policy and institutions, we can empower, we can strengthen the state bamboo development boards, and we can go for the eco branding also, because bamboo production and the utilization of bamboo is sustainable in nature. Apart from these state-wise suggestions for the economic development of the Northeast, we can also mention the infrastructure projects being set up by the government in the Northeast. For example, the setting up of the semiconductor plant, the setting up of linear infrastructure projects also there. We can mention the PM Divine scheme also, which provides for the allocation initially for 8 projects and will fund the infrastructure development in the Northeast region in spirit of the PM Gati Shakti plan and the social development projects based on the needs. It is being implemented by the Northeast Council, and it won't be a substitute for the existing central or the state sponsored schemes. Now there is a mains practice question also. Despite its rich natural resources and strategic location, Northeast India continues to face persistent economic challenges. Examine the major economic challenges faced by the Northeast India. Suggest a multi-pronged strategy for sustainable and inclusive economic development in the region. Please try to write it. The next article is related to the public interest litigation. The context behind it is that the Supreme Court came down heavily upon the misuse of the PILs for gaining publicity. In the recent case, the Supreme Court dismissed the PIL which was filed seeking the persecution of the Maharashtra officials for violating the protocols when the Chief Justice of India was visiting the state of Maharashtra. So we will discuss the need for the public interest litigation, the factors contributing to the growth of PILs in India, the issues related to the PILs, and the judicial observations in this regard. This is important in GS2 under the topic functioning of the judiciary. First, what are the public interest litigations? The PILs can be filed by anyone. You do not need to have a locus standi in that case. You can approach the Supreme Court directly also, and a PIL can be filed under Article 32 as well. And you can approach the High Court also, and a PIL can be filed as a petition under Article 226 also. The courts themselves can also take suo motu cognizance also regarding any matter. The courts can take the cognizance of any letter which is sent to the court. The courts can take cognizance of any newspaper article also and treat it like a public interest litigation. Now, why do we need them? What is the need for the public interest litigation? One, it ensures the access to the justice. Justice is ensured for the marginalized groups, for the marginalized sections, the weaker sections, the economically weaker sections who cannot sue the parties which are economically strong, and their rights are thus protected through the PILs. the NGOs, the other people can also file the public interest litigations in the public interest to ensure that justice is ensured for the economically weaker sections also. Likewise, the PILs can help in the protection of the fundamental rights. For example, the Supreme Court in the Hussainara Khatun versus State of Bihar case observed that the under trials, their right to speedy trial is being violated. If the trial is prolonged too much, then the right to speedy trial is violated, which is implicitly contained within Article 21. Therefore, the fundamental right is protected through the public interest litigation. Likewise, through the Bandhua Mukti Morcha case, the court held that the bonded labor has to be abolished. There is a right against the bonded labor. Therefore, the right was protected. In the Olga Teles case, likewise, the rights of the slum dwellers were protected by the court. The PILs can ensure the accountability from the government also. For example, the Vineet Narayan case upheld the autonomy which has to be there with the CBI. The CBI cannot function as a caged parrot. Likewise, through the PILs, the environmental safeguards have also been put in place. For example, the MC Mehta case, MC Mehta versus Union of India, through that the court ordered the closing of the polluting industries near the Taj Mahal. Likewise, the Vellore Citizens Welfare Forum, through that PIL, the court went for the remediation of the industrial waste in the region, thus protecting the environment. The PILs have helped in bringing about the social reforms also. For example, the Vishaka guidelines were issued after the PIL only, and that led to the Prevention of Sexual Harassment of the Women at Workplace Act also finally. And the PILs, they have led to ensuring of gender justice also. For example, the Shaira Bano case, which ultimately led to the banning of triple talaq in India. Likewise, the PIL, it is a judicial innovation. Thus, the suo motu PILs, they can address the urgent issues also. The urgent issues which need immediate intervention. For example, during the times of COVID, the migrant crisis was handled through the PIL by the court. And it strengthens the democracy also, thus ensuring justice, the protection of rights, which is the duty of the court. Now, what are the factors contributing to the growth of the public interest litigations in India? One, the constitutional framework has been such that it allows the judicial innovations like this. We have a written constitution, and the fundamental rights and directive principles are contained within the constitution under part 3 and part 4 of the constitution respectively. And the courts resort to the fundamental rights and the directive principles to hold the state accountable for protecting the rights and entertaining the PILs. Likewise, in India, the social legislations, they have been progressive. We have strong laws. The strong laws for abolition of bonded labor, for ensuring minimum wages, for ensuring environmental protection. And the courts can compel the executive for the enforcement of these laws. The executive action can be ensured through the public interest litigations. Likewise, the locus standi requirements are relaxed in India. Therefore, the public-spirited individuals, the NGOs, they can also file the public interest litigations. And obviously, the court also takes the suo motu cognizance also. Plus, the judiciary has been expanding the fundamental rights. For example, particularly the expansion of the Article 21, the right to life and personal liberty. And the judicial innovations, they have been pro-poor. For example, the Asiad workers case, where it was allowed that there will be direct access to the Supreme Court in case there are violations for the minimum wage criteria. Likewise, the court itself also appoints commissions as well. These commissions, they help the weak petitioners by gathering the evidence and ensuring that the rights of the weaker sections are not violated. But there are certain issues with the public interest litigations. One, they are often misused for personal gain. They are ostensibly for the public interest, but they are actually promoting the private motive. And therefore, there are frivolous and fraudulent cases, and the private interest is disguised as the public concern. And sometimes it may lead to judicial overreach also. The judicial activism was derived from the theories of vacuum filling, the theory of social want, that is, whenever there is a vacuum, when there is no legislative enactment, no executive order regarding a particular sphere, then the judiciary can step in and fill that vacuum. But if there is the entertainment of too many PILs, which are often frivolous also, it may lead to the judiciary overstepping its mandate at times and may lead to the judicial overreach also. And the PILs, they are often overused and it leads to the dilution of the seriousness. And sometimes the genuine cases, they are trivialized. And the PILs, they should not be treated as the first resort for getting every public grievance redressed. Plus, judiciary also experiences the resource strain and it leads to the delayed justice because there is pendency of the cases in India. Almost 5 crore cases are pending in India, plus the number of judges as a proportion of the population are less in India. For example, it is about just 21 judges per million population, whereas the Law Commission has recommended that we should have 50 High Court judges per million population. And the PILs, they are used at times as a harassment tool also, because the charges, the court fees required for filing of such petitions is pretty low. Now, what have been the observations of the judiciary regarding the PILs and regarding their proper usage? In Subhash Kumar versus State of Bihar case, the PIL was filed by the ex-employee against his former company alleging wrongful practices, and the PIL was actually misused for exacting personal vendetta. The court there observed that before admitting the PIL, it must verify the absence of malice and the publicity behind the claims of the PIL. In Kshetriya Pradushan Sangharsh Samiti versus the state of Uttar Pradesh, a land dispute was disguised as an environmental PIL. The complainants filed it after they failed the property reacquisition. There the court observed that the clean intentions is a must requirement for the admission of a PIL. In SP Gupta versus Union of India case, the court imposed explicit restrictions upon the filing of the public interest litigations, observing that PILs cannot be filed for socio-economic crimes, and it also prohibited in the cases involving offences against women. In Common Cause versus Union of India case, the PIL sought judicial directive to enact a Road Safety Act, but the court observed that a public interest litigation, through that the court cannot compel legislative action. This is beyond judicial ambit. Therefore, these are some of the observations of the judiciary also regarding the public interest litigations. There is a means practice question also. Public interest litigation has emerged as a powerful tool for social justice in India. Critically examine the need for PIL, the issues arising from its misuse, and the key judicial observations that have shaped its evolution. Please try to write it. The next article is related to electric vehicles. This is important in GS3 under the topic Conservation, Environmental Pollution and Degradation. Before coming to the article, let's discuss the benefits and the challenges of the electric vehicles also. Electric vehicles adoption is beneficial for us because it leads to lower costs of maintenance, because the number of moving parts in an electric vehicle is less as compared to the internal combustion engines, and it serves as a good alternative to the internal combustion engines, which leads to the reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, the intensity of the greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced and we will be able to achieve our Panchamrit goals. Plus, there are geopolitical tensions, and these tensions lead to the rise in the oil prices, and India imports more than 80% of its oil needs, and we may have to reduce that dependency going further due to the geopolitical uncertainties. And the adoption of the electric vehicles will lead to the future innovation. It will act as a catalyst for the future innovation in the mobility, promoting the hybrid vehicles, etc. And it can promote the regional industries associated with the electric vehicles, and it can promote the homegrown manufacturing also. It will promote the employment generation, for example, the employment in the production of the electric vehicle sector, the employment in the charging infrastructure, and it will lead to sustainable transport solutions along with the rising urbanization in India. But there are certain challenges associated with the adoption of the electric vehicles. For example, the charging infrastructure has to be improved. The charging is also slow. For example, for the slow charger, it can take up to 12 hours. And we need a stable policy also for the production of the electric vehicles, because it is a capital intensive sector. To even break even, it takes several years, and there are technological challenges also which need to be addressed. For example, the battery life, the semiconductors innovations, the production of controllers, etc. We are dependent upon the imports for critical items, and we need to improve the infrastructural support. For example, the debate regarding the AC versus DC charging stations, the ensuring of grid stability when electric vehicles are being charged, the range anxiety among the electric vehicle customers, and we also import critical minerals like lithium and cobalt also. Now, what are the government initiatives for the adoption of the electric vehicles in India? One, the government launched the FAME India scheme. The FAME India scheme phase 1 focused upon the demand generation, technological advancement, pilot projects, and the development of the charging infrastructure. The phase 2, which started from 2019, focused upon the public and shared transport electrification, that is the electric buses, etc. The government also came up with the production linked incentive scheme. Through the PLI scheme, the domestic manufacturing of the advanced auto technology was promoted, and the target is to ensure that there are $5 billion worth of investments in 5 years. The electric mobility promotion scheme was launched, and the focus here is the adoption of the electric two-wheelers and electric three-wheelers. The battery swapping policy was also launched by the government, that ensures that there are standardized battery specs also for especially the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and the batteries can be swapped directly. It also includes norms related to battery safety, ID tracking, recycling norms, etc. The other initiatives include the tax benefits which are given by the government for the adoption of the electric vehicles. For example, the GST cut, the EVs are imposed upon the GST of 5% now, earlier it was 12%, and the charging stations GST cut from 18% to 5%. Likewise, the customs duty is waived for the machinery which is imported for the production of the lithium ion cells. The road tax is waived to reduce the EV costs. Regarding the registration permits also, there are relaxations. For example, green license plates are issued for the electric vehicles and no permits are required. Now coming to the article, it observes that the electric vehicles also cause pollution. For example, the electric vehicles, they are heavier because of the batteries are heavy, and therefore they cause more tire degradation. The electric vehicles, they are 15 to 20% heavier than the petrol cars, and the tire degradation leads to the release of the microplastics and the nanoparticles into air. Plus, their accelerations are faster. Faster accelerations can lead to more tire stress and leads to more microplastics emission into the environment. The tire degradation process, if you observe, there are two types of particles which are released when the tire degrades. One are the small particles of less than 10 micrometer, and they become airborne pollutants. Then there are the large particles, they settle on the ground usually. The primary cause regarding this tire degradation is sudden braking, potholes, and it leads to the release of the smaller particles. The gradual wear rather leads to the release of the larger particles. This study was conducted by IIT Bombay and Columbia University, and it found that the heavier and the faster electric vehicles, they lead to the more emission of the smaller particles, which leads to the airborne pollution because of the tire degradation. And the road quality improvement may reduce the large particles but not the small ones. Therefore, we need the response. For example, the current air quality standards do not cover the tire microplastics. What can be the solutions? We need to adopt stronger electric vehicle tires. For that, research and development is needed. And we need to put in place emission standards for the non-exhaust pollutants also. For example, the pollutants from the tire degradation. We can adopt the technological fixes also, for example, capturing tire fragments at the source itself. The next article is related to the Upper Siang multipurpose project, which is being built in Arunachal Pradesh. There are protests against it in Arunachal Pradesh. This is important in GS3 under the topic environment. Before coming to the Upper Siang project, let's also understand that China is planning to construct dams upon the Yarlung Sangpo and the Brahmaputra river as it is known in China, and they are going to build it at Medog on Arunachal Pradesh's border, ostensibly to push for the carbon emission reduction and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. But they will be utilizing the fresh water and transporting it to the water scarce southern China region also, and China has plans to divert the Brahmaputra water from the project to its northern arid region as well. So the dam, which may have adverse impacts upon the lower riparian states in India, particularly it will have the environmental consequences and it may create artificial floods in Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. The diversion of water can also strain India's agricultural needs in the northeast region of India. It can lead to the overflows and the floods in India if mismanaged, and the dams on Himalayan rivers, they can cause the losses and difficulties not only for India but for Bangladesh also. So what is India's response? India wants to build the Upper Siang multi-purpose storage project in Arunachal Pradesh, and for that we have conducted the feasibility study also. Now, what is the need of the Upper Siang multi-purpose project? Because Arunachal Pradesh and Assam are heavily dependent upon the water of the Brahmaputra, which if stored by China, it may lead to floods and droughts here. The large volume of water will be stored by China at the Great Bend project, and that may cause artificial floods during monsoon in Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. And the building of the Upper Siang multi-purpose project will help in the economic development of the Arunachal Pradesh, infrastructure development of the Arunachal Pradesh. It will lead to employment generation, fish breeding, water transport, water sports, and lead to the revenue generation from the hydropower project also. But there are certain concerns, there are protests against this project because it may lead to an adverse environmental impact and the social impact also. It may lead to the displacement of the Adi tribe in Arunachal Pradesh, for example, and it will also cause ecological imbalances. It will cause a threat to the ecosystems and biodiversity in the region, and the Forest Conservation Act has created exemptions for such projects, as the strategic projects within 100 kilometers of the borders are exempted. Now, the next article is related to the surplus transfer from the RBI to the central government. This is important in GS3 under the topic Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. Before coming to the article, let's understand why does RBI transfer the surplus capital to the central government. It is mandated under section 47 of the RBI Act 1934 that the central bank is required to pay the balance of its profits to the central government. For that, there is the creation of an economic capital framework. The economic capital framework is the methodology for determining the level of risk provisions and the profit distribution, because the RBI needs to retain certain buffers also to accommodate the risks, and the remaining capital it transfers to the central government. The old economic capital framework was developed in 2014-15 and it was operationalized in 2015-16. But Bimal Jalan committee was set up to review the old economic capital framework to propose the suitable surplus distribution policy, and accordingly the revised economic capital framework was framed. As per the revised economic capital framework, it will be reviewed every 5 years. The targets also include the realized equity, and the economic capital will include the capital reserves, risk provisions and the revaluation balances also. And the total economic capital was recommended to be 20.8% to 25.4% of the RBI's balance sheet. Simultaneously, a contingent risk buffer is also maintained. Earlier it was 5.5 to 6.5%, now it has been promoted to 4.5 to 7.5%, and if the realized equity is more than the required levels, then the entire net income of the RBI will be transferred to the government as per the revised economic capital framework. Now, coming to the article, the surplus transfer from the RBI to the central government has been one of the largest ever, to the tune of 2.68 lakh crore rupees. This has been on account of the rising earnings of the RBI. RBI has earned more because of the sale of the dollars. RBI has been selling dollars to support the falling rupee, and it has earned higher revenue on the foreign assets and due to the rise of the interest rates in the international markets. The RBI's foreign currency assets have also risen by 1.3% in the fiscal year 2025 as compared to the previous year, as it is led by the revaluation gains. As a percentage of the total assets, the foreign currency assets now account for 64.4% and the government securities account for 20.7%. Around 85% of the foreign currency assets are held as securities and the rest are deposits with the other central banks and the Bank of International Settlement. The article also discusses regarding the contingency risk buffer. The CRB is the savings for the rainy day. That is, whenever a country may have a financial stability crisis, then the central bank will consciously maintain it in view of its role as the lender of the last resort. It is the component of the RBI's economic capital required to cover its monetary and financial stability, credit and operational risks. Now we have increased it to 7.5% maximum, and it is a prudent move. The next article is related to the PM Internship Scheme. This is important in GS2 under the topic Governance. Before coming to the article, let's have a brief overview regarding the PM Internship Scheme. This scheme was launched to provide internship opportunities to 1 crore youth in top 500 companies in India over a period of 5 years. It provides the monthly stipend also of 5,000 per month for the selected interns for 1 year. 4,500 is provided by the government and 500 is provided by the companies selected through their corporate social responsibility, the CSR funds. Now, what are the objectives of this scheme? It is to bridge the academia industry gap, to enhance the employability of our youth. It supports the Atmanirbhar Bharat also, to ensure that there is production and indigenization in India, and it is administered by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs via an online portal. When we look at the internship structure, it covers more than 25 sectors including pharma, auto, banking, energy, etc. And it provides an additional support also as 6,000 rupees as a one-time incidental grant, and it provides insurance under the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana and Suraksha Bima Yojana also. And regarding the implementation, there is an online process where you can apply, and after shortlisting there is virtual onboarding. The remote work is provided, that training mentorship is accessible nationwide. Now, after the pilot of this scheme, there are some enhancements which are proposed. One, the portal is upgraded along with the geotagging of the companies, and there can be an application for 3 internships pan-India. Regarding the monitoring and outreach of the scheme, there is performance tracking for the states and the union territories. There are awareness drives being conducted at the colleges, Rozgar Melas being held, and the multilingual helpline and grievance redressal mechanism is put in place. So who is eligible for the PM internship scheme? Any person from the age of 21 to 24 years and who is not enrolled in full-time education and is not employed full-time. Regarding the family criteria, no member should be earning more than 8 lakhs per member annum, and no member should have a government job in the family. Now, coming to the article, based upon the review of the previous phases of this scheme, now the Ministry of Corporate Affairs is proposing to tweak the scheme slightly. The companies beyond top 500 have also shown the intent to participate in the scheme, and therefore the CIA and FICCI, they have also reached out to the government, reaching out and extending their support also in this regard. The next article is related to the Protection of Children Against Sexual Offences Act. This is important in GS2 under the topic Mechanisms, Laws, Institutions and Bodies Constituted for Protection and Betterment of the Vulnerable Sections. Before coming to the article, let's discuss briefly regarding the POCSO Act also. The POCSO Act came into force in 2012. It protects children, both boys and girls, below 18 years of age from sexual offences, and it includes a range of sexual activities, for example, pornography, sexual harassment, sexual assault, penetrative as well as non-penetrative offences. And severe punishment is given if protectors are the perpetrators of the sexual offences. For example, it is done by police, parents, guardians, etc. The reporting is mandatory for all the citizens in case any sexual abuse happens to the nearest police station, and the procedures under the POCSO Act are made to be child friendly to reduce the trauma for the child. Now, why is it so comprehensive? Because it ensures the confidentiality of the identity of the child also. And the burden of proof, which is usually upon the prosecution, here lies upon the accused in the case of the POCSO Act. Also, it is gender neutral in nature, and therefore both protection for the boys as well as girls is provided. It covers a comprehensive spectrum of the criminal sexual offences, for example, including the pornography, penetrative as well as non-penetrative offences, and there is no time limit which is prescribed for the reporting. Any offence which is punishable under the POCSO Act can be reported anytime, and the child protection is treated as a collective responsibility. Now, coming to the article, the Supreme Court upheld the conviction of a man for sexually assaulting a minor in 2018, but it did not sentence him. It noted that the accused and the victim, they are both married, they had a daughter, and the victim would be the sufferer if the convict was jailed again. Therefore, the court exercised its extraordinary jurisdiction under Article 142 of the Constitution by holding that the accused stands convicted, but he will not undergo any sentence. Article 142 gives the extraordinary power to the Supreme Court to pass any direction, to issue any decree, to pass any judgment in any case to ensure complete justice in that matter. Therefore, the court said that we have no option but to sentence the accused and send him to jail for undergoing minimum punishment prescribed by the statute. But in this case, the society, the family of the victim, and the legal system have done enough injustice to the victim. She has been subjected to enough trauma and agony. We do not want to add to the injustice done to the victim already by sending her husband to jail. We as judges cannot shut our eyes to these harsh realities. Thank you.